Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
Welcome, I'm Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source and host of today's Bend Don't Break podcast. I actually should not say today. I'm the host every week. Just the host, the regular old host. I have with me today Abby Rowland. She is the executive director of Saving Grace, where she has been leading the organization since July 1 of this year. Prior to this role, she served as the executive director for Sun River Nature Center for 6 years, overseeing its strategic development and operations. Her career in nonprofit leadership began in 2001, and she has worked with a variety of grassroots organizations, as well as larger institutions like the Loma Linda University Children's Hospital in Southern California, where she supported critical initiatives for child health and welfare. Abby is passionate about leading mission-driven organizations, ensuring they remain impactful and sustainable, whether in conservation, where she has worked extensively on community engagement with nature, or in direct services, where she has witnessed the importance of advocacy for vulnerable populations. Her commitment has always been to help organizations thrive in serving their communities.
Yeah.
Abby, thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
So you are only been in since July 1 into Saving Grace. That I can only imagine how much water is coming through that fire hose. How's the transition been?
Yeah, it's been definitely a fire hose and not enough digits to plug all the holes that are coming at me, but it's such an important resource in our community. So I've been really excited to learn every single day, even with as much as it's coming at me.
And I'm sure most people still know you from Sun River Nature Center. You were there for 6 years. You did such a fabulous job down there. And I'm sure for people watching and listening, the name resonates. So they might not even have known that you had moved.
No, and I've been in this community in the nonprofit sector since 2006, starting at Boys and Girls Club years and years and years ago. So it's nice to be back in Bend. There was a bit of a gate between Sun River and the Bend community, so I'm really thrilled to be back in this capacity.
Yeah. Did you stay living in Bend and commuting down to Sun River during that time? Or
I did. I live in Bend. Yep.
Yeah. Rough commute.
Rough commute, especially in the winter time. I did have to change vehicles and tires and all the things that go along with that. But yes, this is much closer to my home now.
So how is what would you say your biggest transition has been from working in more of an environmental kind of situation down in Sun River, and now you're working at Saving Grace, where feels like stakes are a little higher, a little more serious?
Yeah, there's definitely, the stakes are higher. I would say pace. When you're working in direct service, I think that you have to be ready and willing to pivot directions. And that's been my experience every single day at Saving Grace. I come to work thinking I'm going to accomplish a certain list of tasks, which really is any nonprofit work, but just about everything on the list pivots to either whether it's a client emergency or problem solving, whatever it may be. But we are the only resource here, so I have to be ready to jump in different directions in different counties.
Yeah, that's what always strikes me about positions as serious as yours, is that transitions like that, the need doesn't stop. It's just someone new comes in, and it's, the expectation, there's no ramp up. If you're training for a normal position, you can back it down a little bit and be like, take your time, get up to speed, enjoy your training here, your training there. But I can't imagine that's the situation.
It's definitely challenging, but I have an amazing team. The whole Saving Grace team is incredibly supportive. They know their work, they're dedicated, and that definitely makes my day-to-day better. I'm really proud to work with them.
Should mention, because it's something that the listeners of this podcast would know, Donna Britt left helping with this podcast to come in. what's exactly her title over there?
Director of Development.
Yeah,
Yep.
development director. And saw her briefly before the podcast came on, but great person, great asset for you to
Huge
have
asset,
there.
especially from the media standpoint and the marketing standpoint. Fundraising, I know really well, but those other aspects are not my strength without a little bit of direction from somebody else. So I'm so grateful to have Donna and her team.
Yeah, great. Well, Abby, why don't you just tell for people who might not be familiar with Saving Grace's mission and what you guys do in the community, a little bit about the organization itself.
Sure. So we are the only community resource in the Tri-County area for domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, stalking, and kind of all of the areas that fall within that. So we provide direct services to clients that are free. We provide community education related to prevention. We have emergency shelter that we provide for people who are in immediate danger. We provide counseling services. We have a hotline, a local hotline number that people can call for support. And then we also have Mary's Place, which is our safe exchange or supervised visitation center for families that need that.
How long has Saving Grace been in operation?
Since 1977.
Wow.
Yes, so very long time, and the needs just keep increasing.
Yeah.
So we're consistently having to balance meeting those community needs because it's, you have a list of needs that you receive from each county, and it is growing and the awareness is growing. And there really isn't anything we want to take off our list. So it is a consistent balance of staffing needs and how are we going to balance this, because we don't want to turn folks away because we are such a necessary resource, but we do have a lot of pressure on us to meet the needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You, we had Zach Boone in here from the COCC Foundation, and spoke a little bit about the challenges that nonprofits are facing in this kind of post-pandemic world. And, the pandemic really did shake up the funding mechanisms for a lot of organizations. And I'm imagining it's the same for you, just different changing ways that you're getting your funding. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And in comparison from where I came from with Sun River, because getting them through the pandemic as well, a lot of the funding did pivot to those direct service and basic needs organizations. So Saving Grace did see an uptick in funding, at least from the state and federal level, whereas an organization like Sun River did not.
Right.
Some of the resources were pulled away to make sure they were emergently provided for other organizations. But now we're kind of at the point where those funds during COVID are ending.
Right.
So we're having to pivot and plan for how are we going to make up for the resources that we received during that time, because our services have not decreased.
Sure.
So we are relying on our community. We're relying on our donors and growing our donor base and finding more private grants to fulfill those needs.
I can't imagine how it must be with an organization like yours that serves the larger Tri-County area. And, we think, or most people I think of growth in terms of like, oh my gosh, Bend is really growing. Or if you're in Redmond, you think, oh, Redmond's really growing. But the perspective of somebody who's providing services to all of those communities and the amount of growth, and with those growth is always, unfortunately, that percentage that's going to increase for these other downsides like domestic violence. And that's got to be daunting, to think that, somehow, no matter how these populations are growing, you got to find that donor base, you got to find those federal funds.
Yeah, we do have an incredible base, and we have such a positive name in the community, and we're well known. So finding people energized to support our mission, it isn't a difficult task, but it is a difficult task to make sure we're getting sustaining funds and getting our story out there, and just awareness around intimate partner violence and coercive control and all the things that impact families, kind of debunking some of those myths around domestic violence, that it's not just physical. It doesn't just look like a certain demographic. We have it here, and it's really high.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a little, Megan, who still remains off camera. I mention her every week, but we haven't gotten her a
And you
microphone yet.
hear
Yeah.
her a little bit. Yeah.
But we were talking about this before, and maybe you can speak to it. I mean, I do think there's still a majority of people that believe that domestic violence looks like physical violence.
Correct.
That's the barrier. And what is the message that you guys put out that changes that perspective?
That it is not just that.
Yeah.
And it can be something as simple as, little microaggressions that
Yeah.
anybody in the community won't pick up on observing a couple,
Right.
interacting. It's physical, it can be sexual, it can be financial, psychological. It's all sorts of levels. And I think a lot of people, just because of the message that's out there, that it does look like something physical or you need to see a bruise.
Well, that's kind of what you're taught, right? To say, oh, look
it
for
is.
this sign, and it's usually,
And it can
the
be
bruising.
nothing physical, and it
Right.
can be financial and psychological.
Right.
And, as I said, those little microaggressions, that's what it looks like. But anyone in the community isn't necessarily going to pick up on it unless you see a pattern.
Right.
And it can be many of those combined. It can be sexual and financial, or it can be just physical. It's defined in so many ways.
Yeah.
And just teaching and empowering those to just stand up for themselves and recognize those patterns for themselves, that their gut is telling them
Right.
something's not right.
Yeah.
And we are a resource for that.
How do, I imagine that it's hard, it must be the challenge to get this message out to people who are actually experiencing this, not just in the observation, but that, have you seen people taking that initiative to come in and go, I'm oppressed, this is just a heavy.
Yeah, we get so many calls through our helpline, and it's the hardest call to make. I've had to make it. It takes every ounce of your being to make that call, because you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, even if it is small.
Right.
But we encourage those that are maybe even just questioning little elements of their relationship, like, is this normal or is this not normal? We can help with that. So we understand how hard it is. A lot of our employees are survivors themselves, which does help make that step a little bit easier for somebody if they are brave enough in the moment to make that call.
Yeah, I would think it would be, a difficult call in that moment. What do you find to be the single largest hurdle to somebody in one of those relationships actually
Picking up
going from knowing to going and
Safety.
seeking help?
Safety. What's the process that's going to happen after I make this call? So first step is safety planning. And maybe in that moment, it's not the right time to leave. Or maybe in that moment, it's not the right time to communicate that, but we have the resources to help map that out. So all of those concerns are, at least we can hopefully provide a next step
Sure.
of what to expect.
Sure. One thing that you said previously, I was thinking the person in that situation doesn't know. I would imagine the majority of them, at least initially, would not know what, quote, normal would be, or have come from an experience or some kind of situation where they don't know. And how would they know? How would they get to the point? I guess we're talking about safety, but that seems like the thing that would be the most difficult is having that point in your head where it clicks and says, this isn't right.
Well, I think listening to your gut, right? Following your intuition. I think, just with my own experience, I can look back and go, oh, there's about 40 times my gut was saying something's not right. It's not just in your head, or, your self-doubt meter goes up. And a lot of it, I would say, is just little tiny drips with your partner or whoever that may be. And so you learn to question yourself, but your gut is always going to tell you. And everybody's situation and safety plan could look different, because you may have children, you may not have children.
Right.
Your partner could be in town or out of town. So we're able to customize what that looks like for family situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe take me through the next step. If someone does call, you identify that it's a real threat. You begin to make a safety plan. what happens?
They'll go through a screening process, and we assess what the safety need is, whether it's emergent or if
Right.
it's something we can plan out. And then they're assigned to an advocate, and that advocate works directly with them to get them the support they need, whether it's counseling, maybe they only need counseling,
Right.
or maybe they need help filling out a restraining order. So we have services for just that. It's just talking through everybody's specific needs
Right.
and creating a plan around that.
What
Not
if-
everybody that comes is going to need an exact safety plan that looks the
Yeah.
same.
And I got to imagine that's also part of it too, is that if someone's picking up that phone there, or the perception is that counseling isn't an option. I mean, and I could be professing my own ignorance here, but I would think that by the time I got to the point where I was picking the phone up, I would be in pretty far down the path and
Yeah.
in trouble. And I think it's good for people to understand that there are counseling's available. Like that seems like a good first step in getting it to it a little earlier.
It's a good first step, and it's hard. Just that recognition that it is common. I mean, it is, the statistic is that somebody in this situation would go back to their abuser 7 times before they get the courage to
Wow.
leave. So us understanding that step is really important, because it can take a day and it can take years to leave
Right.
that situation, because it is that difficult. And that time when you leave to when you actually leave is the most dangerous time
Right.
for a victim. And the biggest thing with us, especially when it comes to calling the helpline, we really need people to let us know that it's safe to call the number back, or it's a safe place to leave a voicemail, because otherwise we can't return that call. So that
Right.
is one of our biggest hurdles that we often encounter, is that, I need to hear back from somebody, but unless you tell us that it's a safe number, we can't help.
And then you guys do then begin to, once you have this person in a safe situation, you liaise between the partners or whoever's involved.
Depends.
Okay.
It absolutely depends.
Yeah.
So that goes back to just customizing what that looks like. I don't believe, and this is an area that I haven't been educated on, is how much we would directly liaise between partners. I don't think that we do a lot
Okay.
of that, but I would have to fact check that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've only been there since.
I know. Well, it seems like by now I should know that answer, but I do
Yeah,
not.
no, I wouldn't
yeah.
expect that. Well, the reason that we were piqued to have you in is because it's October's Domestic Violence
It
Awareness
is.
Month. I
Yep.
understand the Bend City Council
Yes.
ratified that last night.
They
I mean,
did.
listeners,
Thank
this will
you.
be some time, but congratulations on getting the designation and getting out there.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so supported in this community.
Yeah.
So I am really looking forward to getting to know our community better and
Yeah.
the supporters that we have.
I have a list here of a lot of businesses that have contributed to your Violence Awareness Month events. A full disclosure, I know from Donna that she has not seen this list.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm not going to.
I have on a whiteboard.
I'm not going to drill you on it. But
Yeah, thank you.
But I did want listeners and viewers to know there are things like Pint Night at Spider City Brewing. Flight's Wine Bar is giving proceeds. Spork has a dine out on October 8th all day. You can get lunch or dinner and 20% of proceeds go. So you can go to their website, saving-grace.org/DVAM, and get more information on all of them. And I've been assured that over the course of time, you're going to be giving more and more people are going to be signing up for this. So
Yes, and we do have our one of our new prevention programs is we are partnering with local bars and restaurants to get our coasters and posters in those establishments to provide more education and awareness and support to our community.
What is a thing or a few things that you think that people should know about your program that they might not otherwise know?
I think for me, one of the things that really drove me to this position was just the education part of it. That I know how many years I checked my gut intuition.
Right.
Just to get out there, if that little flag is starting, that you do have a tremendous resource in Saving Grace to help provide those steps. that's number one. And two is just how can we support families through something like this, because it is so challenging to be an ex-partner with children involved.
Right.
And it's so complicated, and we do have the expertise and the knowledge to help guide that as well.
Right.
And just getting that community awareness as domestic violence or intimate partner violence is not just physical.
Yeah, what shocked me in looking through the materials that you've got is, I think the stat is 1 in 3 women involved in a domestic
correct.
experience.
1
of
in 3
violence,
for women and
1 in 4 for men, which
huge.
I think that also struck me. I mean, obviously from
In a
my
lifetime,
own gender
right.
perspective, but I'm shocked. I'm
Yeah,
shocked at that number.
And just the social norms. A lot of men especially don't report.
Right.
A lot of women don't report. And a lot of that has to do with what's happening behind the scenes and the control that's happening behind the scenes, because a lot of times people are isolated.
Right.
And that's part of it. So just finding a confidential space to just check yourself and just understand if this feeling is true. It likely is. And we're here to support.
Well, and finding out a little bit if you don't know what normal looks like,
Right.
and being able, I think that if people, probably a lot of these situations could de-escalate if people were able to just reach out, get a few helpful words and know, okay, well, I can, at least push back on this, or
like, this is happening. Does this seem right? Or does there
right.
seem to be an imbalance here?
Right.
Likely there's an imbalance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Abby, we're at the end of our time.
Thank you so much for
here.
having me.
Anything you'd like to say to people before we let parting words, or
parting words?
not that you're going anywhere.
No,
other
I'm
than
not
off
going
the
anywhere.
screen. And,
Yes, absolutely. Reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you on any way to either support you or get yourself involved or your business involved. We're here to help and support. And those of you who are listening and like, maybe this is happening in my own life, know that there's a number that you can call. Do you want me to go through that phone number?
Go through the phone and give
All
people
right.
the website would be great.
Sure. Our 24-hour helpline is 541-389-7021. You can also find that on our website, which is saving-grace.org. I forget our dashes all the time. There's
I
a
saw
lot.
that in there.
There's a
I
lot.
caught that. Yeah. Well,
Yep.
and also I know if you're a business out there, there's still time to be part of the program for the October Awareness Month.
Yes.
And never too late to get involved.
No, please reach out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks you guys for listening. This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. And if you're interested in supporting what we do in the journalism space, don't hesitate to look on our website, become a member, or help sponsor this podcast. And we'll bring in more terrific people like Abby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bensource.com.